Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the fifth episode of the Soccer Scene with myself, Adrian Finnan, and joined once again this evening by Noel O'Connor as we run the rule over all things Treaty United, including last weekend's defeat to Cobh Ramblers and the upcoming fixture with Athlone Town, as well as maybe touching a bit on the recent results for the women's side at the very end as well. But Noel, just to start off with the disappointment of last week, obviously Cobh Ramblers coming to the Marks Field, took away a 3-0 win, Wilson Muweru scoring and Jack Doherty scoring a brace, all in the second half, Noel, in front of over 700 spectators. It was a disappointing evening.
Look, it was kind of were a bit worried about it after the Kerry game. I think I would have said last week that that result will look worse as the weeks go on, and then Galway hit Kerry for 9, albeit in Terryland Park. But I think one of the things I said, I thought that Treaty were a bit passive towards the end of the game. I thought that game was really there for the taking in Kerry, and particularly when Kerry went down to 10 men, I would judge how well you did. I hear about managers about we had chances is like you look at how well the opposition keeper played, and I don't think he was that overworked in the second half. Now I would agree that Treaty last week probably should have scored a couple in the first half against Kerry, but in the second half, particularly the last 20 minutes, which is really where a lot of games are won and lost, when the game's in the melting pot. And it was an even game then on Friday. Thought Cobh had a real purpose about how they played. Tommy changed the team up a bit, had success on the right. I think he did play quite well. But then something that we would have said here about the important thing for Treaty is to keep Enda Curran as close to the opposition penalty box as possible. And then the opposition, we said about Bray with a degree of success, and probably Galway, that they played a nice high line and kept him away. But then we had the situation on Friday night where he was playing actually nearly as a number 10, like, and not an out and out striker, which I found a bit confusing, particularly when Tommy was bold enough to go for, as Tommy Lynch called it early in the LOI commentary, a kind of 4-2-4, with Conor Barry on one side and Success on the other, if you like, to fire the bullets into the box. And yet we had the top goal scorer from last season in the league, sitting in a kind of a deeper role. But overall, it was an even game. I think chances were few and far between. In fairness to Treaty, they had a couple of good chances. I remember one very clever free kick. I think they hit the ball at the post with it. And Cobh had a couple of half chances as well. But when Cobh went in front, I suppose, and that's the disappointing thing, is that last 10 or 15 minutes, I didn't see a huge amount from Treaty, and it was Cobh who drove on and eventually came out with a 3-0 victory.
Yeah, speaking on that, and the current decision maybe to play him, deeper as a kind of a sporting striker, a sporting attacking midfielder almost, who was sitting on Jason Abbott for Cobh at times, in supporting Dean George, Noel. Can you see any? I know you can't see any merit in it. Sorry, that's the wrong word. Obviously, you've made their opinion clear on that. I mean, what was the thought process behind it, do you think, Noel? Because obviously I know that Enda Curran, look, he got off the mark against Kerry. If people were expecting Enda to do what he did again last season, because last season was a phenomenal achievement, it's probably unlikely, but he'd be hoping to get to double figures. But was the reason maybe to try and get him more involved in the game? I assume it was to get him more involved in the build-up play as well. But I don't really know what the thinking was behind it, or maybe you could shed some light on it.
I'm not quite sure. Look, obviously they train together a couple of nights a week. I'm not privy to that. He might be showing something in training that that we wouldn't know much. But like, my experience of him is that he's an out and out goal scorer. He's a poacher. He's lethal inside in the box. If there's a ball across coming in, and it beats the first man, he's invariably there or thereabouts. He's good in the air. And he's got some fine finishes with his feet as well. So I wasn't quite sure. I could see the merit, if you like, just a little bit in terms of the attack side, but I certainly did get a bit of a shiver up my spine when Tommy Lynch said 4-2-4, because the other side of this league is you certainly have to be solid, and if you're not, you are likely to concede goals. And I know it didn't happen until the last 10 or 15 minutes, but I mean, the pattern for me was a late goal against Bray, a late lack of effort, if you like, against Kerry, and 3 goals in the last, well, 2 particularly in the last 10 minutes of the game on Friday night, particularly when you're a goal down, or as in Kerry where you're mad for a win and they're playing against 10 men, that you kind of dominate that last part of the game and pepper the opposition. You may well not get the goal that you want, but that's because that the keeper's made a couple of brilliant saves and you've hit the post or hit the bar, or someone has missed a sitter or whatever. And we just don't see that at the moment, and that's a little bit of a worry. I don't know if it's a fitness thing. It's a bit hard to judge, but it's a bit of a worry that in general, unlike last year maybe and the year before, even if Treaty were a goal down, and they certainly, I can recall matches in my head where they came back with late equalisers, even against Athlone, I think last year. I remember a Shelburne game, 2 of them actually, I think, one in the Marcus Field and one above in Talca Park, where where they come up with very late goals. And there's just no sign of that happening this season, certainly so far, and it certainly is a bit of a worry.
Yeah, certainly. I suppose you did mention, Noel, that it was for long periods until maybe the last 25 minutes anyway, a very even contest on Friday night. And Tommy Barrett did mention after the game, and he was bemoaning, the fact that when his team do get chances, they don't take them. There was evidence of that, obviously, Noel, because the Kern had a couple of chances in the first half. One where there was a deflected strike that hit the post, and then he had one at the very back post where I felt he totally mistimed his jump for a header, actually, which meant that it just kind of sailed into the arms of Lee Stacey. And Willie Armstrong missed the chance, albeit the game was over at the very end, but struck it straight at the goalkeeper. There does seem to be a case of when Treaty do get, those chances, that I couldn't say if it's a lack of conviction or whether it's just a lack of quality and composure, but there maybe a combination of all 3 things. But even when they do get into those chances, which isn't all, I wouldn't say it's few and far between, but it is effectively few and far between in the first 4 games, that they don't seem to be able to capitalise on them at all.
No, and I think you're right. And the other side of that is they're probably the same amount of chances that they created in probably most matches last year. Only 1 or 2 of them went in, and then you don't think about the 2 they missed, or the 3 they missed if they drew 1-1 or if they win 1-0. And obviously it's very noticeable when you're looking at that, and people are looking at the goals. 1 goal in 4 games. It is a worry from that point of view, and you could see what was in Tommy's head on Friday night, putting Success on the right and Conor Barry on the left, and playing with 2 up front realistically, because I know we saw Enda dropping a bit deep, but no one believed that he was going to make a huge contribution to the midfield, and I think the setup of the midfield, was what Tommy thought as well, because he had 2 more sitting midfielders, if you like. And I know Lee Devitt does break forward and has scored an odd goal and has a few strikes, but in general, he is what you call a sitting midfielder. Mark Walsh certainly the same. So, he's obviously gone on the double there to kind of protect that area, knowing that Enda maybe wouldn't do the work that other midfielders would do, but then that's not what he's there for, as far as I'm concerned. He's there to get in the box and score goals, and that's the magic that he brings, and that's what brought a lot of the good results last year, and I certainly wouldn't be moving him from that position.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see him. We will discuss the team for Athlone later on, but you mentioned Success, Erdogan, Noel, and you have been, I suppose, a bit critical of him in recent weeks, in terms of you don't maybe think he shows enough maybe inventiveness, or for the want of a better word, likes of composure on the field maybe, and it, on Friday night, in fairness, despite what was a relatively slow start, I thought Keane Brown at left full had done okay for Cobh Ramblers, but then Success drew a couple of fouls from him, and obviously in the second half had a couple of shots and seemed to have the beating of him. It was probably one of his better displays for Treaty, to be fair.
I think so. I suppose my criticism of him is not so much his lack of inventiveness, but like from what I know, he's a very quick player. You know, has real pace, and which is a real asset for any player to have. And from I just didn't see him kind of utilizing it. You know, I go back to the time, you know, where we had the likes of Gary Sheen around the place, and he certainly had pace, and you certainly knew he had pace. You know, when you saw him playing, because every chance he got, he was on his bike, if you like. And I just felt for such a big guy as well, that he seemed to go down very easy. Now he didn't do any, sorry, he didn't do that on Friday. Um, I'm sure he was probably bursting for a game as well. You know, he's kind of looking at himself as a striker, and you have Dean George and then the Kern there, and he's certainly not getting in ahead of them as a striker when, you know, when both of them are fit. So I suppose the chance to play on the wide area is the next best thing, and certainly with the attributes he has, he should do well there, and he has some experience of a striker, so he should know what kind of a ball a striker likes to receive in the box as well when he's out there. So that's another asset for him, if you like. And I think overall, you know, it was a good move, and I would expect to see more of him there. And again, we will be looking at the other side of it, particularly away from home. He's got to do the other side of the game as well, and that's get back and support his fullback and just make the midfield solid. And I suppose if there's one thing that all the wide players have not maybe done enough of it this season, is that work, because they all read the possession stats, and in general it's 48 or 52 or 49 or 51% possession, which means for half the game you don't have the ball, and you know, guys have to think hard about what they're doing for that half of the match when your own team is out of possession.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose we touched on it earlier on, but what the hallmark of the three United teams for the last couple of years and all is the solidity. And, you know, we were blue in the face from talking about that, which I suppose makes the start to the season a bit more worrying, particularly the relative capitulation. I know Treaty were going for an equaliser, so those 2 goals late on, which came from a lively Jack Doherty, were as a consequence of that as well. I suppose in some ways, one man who we were very happy to, and still are very happy to have back with Treaty, is Anthony O'Donnell at centre back, but he has endured a tough couple of first outings at the Markets Field in particular. And all, obviously, they had that mistake, which I suppose you could categorise in the unfortunate area on the opening night against Bray, but obviously a tougher one to take for him. We'll say that the mistake that led to the 3rd goal for Jack Doherty, which was very uncharacteristic of Anto O'Donnell. So I suppose you have a bit of that as well, Noel, don't you? It's typical of football. Like everything that Anto O'Donnell touched in 2021 went right. And sometimes you just have to get over these periods where they go wrong, because it's just the nature of football.
Yeah, and he's been out for a year as well. Look, I wouldn't have any doubts about Anto O'Donnell. We can see what he can do. He's I think he's a prototype centre half for that division. You know, and it's not something that he normally does, in fairness, make a sharp pass, because in general, when he gets on the ball, it's 50 or 60 yards up the field. And look, I'm absolutely fine with that. We spoke about his threat from set plays. It's the second kind of error, if you like, all right, in 4 games, and he will be disappointed about that. I was a small bit surprised about the substitution of Mark Walsh, I have to say, with the score being at 1-0. There was a real chance still that there could have been a point got in that match, you know, with however minutes to go. And I would have thought that Andy Spain was the guy to take off, you know, in terms of leaving a bit of experience on the pitch. And I would have thought it would have been a better idea to take Andy Spain off and maybe put Mark Walsh back alongside Anto O'Donnell for that last few minutes, you know, because at that stage, I think Mark Ludden was already gone off as well, and Dean George was gone off. So, you know, experience is so important in that league, and he might have just, you know, had a little word in his ear or calmed the whole thing down back there and say, look, we'll stick at it, don't concede anymore, we'll play it till the 95th minute, and we'll see if we can nick a goal. And I thought that was lacking as well on Friday.
Yeah, it's uncharted territory, Noel, for this team, to be fair. I just mentioned about, you know, Anthony O'Donnell when, you know, 2021, he scored 6 goals. He's a colossus at the back. Obviously, I don't remember him really making any mistake that led to a goal. Then you have a couple in the first 4 games here. So it's all about your character. But that can be said for the whole team, Noel, because for the last 2 seasons, and it was something that the management team had really got across, is that you want to get points on the board as much as possible, as early as possible. And that was the case for them in the last 2 seasons, really. Now you have a totally different scenario in their third season, where a lot of these players, the players that were there last year and then the players that have come back that were there the year before, haven't had this kind of start to the season. So a real test for them overall.
No, absolutely. And it's tough. It's a tough position to be in.
The league is unforgiving, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And look, there's no real chance you never have much time to sort things out. Like you're barely over one game, and after a couple of days, you're only a couple of days away from the next one, and you're trying to plan and see what you can do. And it is really tough. And as you said, the last couple of years, like they've been kind of looking back at fifth place, and they've always had this cushion, that they've been maybe 6, 8, or 9 points away from fifth place, if you like. And now they're looking at the table, and they're probably 6 points off it. And look, but a couple of wins can change that very easy. They've got to keep their heads. The experienced voices around the place are going to be important, and I think it's important to keep them on the pitch as long as you can. And they certainly need to tighten up in terms of whatever about conceding one goal. They can't really be conceding 2 or 3 in a short space of time, which in fairness only has happened on Friday, but it doesn't give you much chance to get the kind of result you need. I think they might have to go a little bit more conservative now, certainly away from home, and try and keep the score at 0-0 for as long as they can.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose in terms of changes for the Athlone Town game, Noel, to the team, you've already mentioned that maybe you would have put Mark Walsh at centre back for the last 15 minutes of the Cobh Ramblers match. A suggestion, maybe, I would think, could you bring in Alec Byrne into midfield next to Lee Devitt, Noel, and put Mark Walsh into centre back with Anto O'Donnell, because I do know those players did have at least 6 or 7 games in 2021 when Sean Gearns was injured together and didn't really put a foot wrong. Do you think that well, it's certainly an option, but do you think that's a possibility for Tommy Barrett?
Yeah, I think it's a good option as well. I actually was thinking about it, and I haven't seen a lot of Andy Spain play, but I've heard he's a very fit individual, very strong and fit guy, good athletic guy, and I think he may well be an option to play right back. I spoke to a few people, and I remember myself, I used to, even with centre halves, if they were young, bar the exceptional ones, maybe play them as full backs, for a number of games before you put them into the middle, and just to get that, Yeah, well, I think Conor Molan was a noticeable one. I know Paul Finucane played left full as well before he went in centre half. We obviously had Brian Buckley initially playing left back, who could certainly play centre half. With his pace and with his strength, and it would make that right side a bit more solid, I think, with success there as well. Good experience at the back. Obviously, 2 fellas who know each other well. I presume Mark Ludden will start as well. And in fairness to the keeper, I think he hasn't really done a whole lot wrong either since he came in the 2 games.
I haven't actually spoken about him, Noel, really. I feel maybe that's a good thing, I suppose, in 2 games.
It is a good thing for him, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He looks very, very composed, very relaxed, and there's a decent back 5. Like, I mean, I am a bit surprised that Alec Byrne hasn't started a game. I certainly thought he'd start in Kerry. I thought it would be a very good game for him to start. He didn't start there. He's come on, maybe, again, they're kind of chasing the game when he's coming on. And I think himself and Lee Devitt might be the right combination for next week. They certainly have to get a hold of the ball more. With the pace of success on the right, someone like Alec Byrne maybe could give him something to run it. So the team can actually utilise his pace, and that brings a bit of excitement to the supporters as well when they see that that kind of football. Stephen Christopher came on, I think, as well, so you probably look at him maybe playing behind Enda Curran.
Yeah, you mentioned that, Noel, that you feel that maybe against that loan away from home, particularly away from home, considering the run you're on, chances are it's not going to be a 4-4-2 from Treaty or 4-2-4. It's probably going to be a bit more conservative and maybe a bit more like last year. So, Stephen Christopher playing in behind Enda Curran with maybe Dean George moving to the wing is a high possibility, I'd imagine.
It is, yeah. I'm not so sure. Dean George, I just felt the way he was going off that he had picked up some kind of a strain. So whether he's going to be fit that quick, I wasn't kind of banking on that. But obviously, if he was, I certainly like him there on the left. And in fairness to Conor Barry, didn't do too bad there either on Friday night before his substitution. So look, there's still a good solid team there. A nice mix, nice and solid. Three in the middle, and we need to see more of Alec Byrne. I think he's probably a midfielder that really have been crying out for the last couple of years, and the sooner he starts getting a few minutes into him, I think the better.
Yeah, and I suppose a word on Athlone, Noel, they had a very fast start, and you quite amusingly quipped that their league title was over after 2 weeks, their league title charge, but they have had 2 defeats since then, obviously against 2 southeast sides, Wexford, and then lost 1-0 to Waterford. And it was an absolute, in fairness, the only difference, well, not the only difference on the scoreboard anyway, between the 2 sides on Friday night was a fabulous free kick from Shane Griffin of Waterford, to be fair. Now, we know that Athlone made, huge strides, Noel. They're very cosmopolitan lineup actually as well. But they made huge strides towards the end of last year. They still have a good few of those players there. Patrick Hickey, the midfielder, Enda Minogue, the goalkeeper. But they have a couple of very lively players as well in that squad. And we do know that Treaty, probably last season, there was a lot put on it, but they had 2 of their probably worst displays were in at the Athlone Town Stadium, so they can't allow that get into their head or their psyche.
No, absolutely not. And look, it is a week that you have to build guys up and keep at them and keep working on them. And I think it has to be defensive. They have to, minute by minute, keep the game at 0-0. If they can nick a goal, great. But certainly if they can't, the longer the game goes at 0-0, that's the thing now. Because if you start to leak goals, sometimes it can be hard to stop. And again, we go back to the Cobh game, and the score, it may well be flattering for Cobh, but it just ended, the goals went in kind of easy, and that was the real worry about it. Every chance they seemed to get there in the second half, it just went into the net, and you might say that's a bit of luck, but the other side of that is you'd expect to repel a few of those maybe, and maybe keep it at 2-0 and maybe go and nick a goal, and you might still lose. But the 3-0 had a bit of an emphatic ring about it, and they certainly need to keep that tight next week and try and keep that clean sheet as long as they can above in Athlone.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go for a 1-0 Treaty United win of Old. Noel, what's your own prediction?
I'll go for 1-1, and I think that Tommy will be happy to get a point and stop the rot, and look forward to a big game the following week at home to Waterford.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I hope you're wrong, Noel, but there's going to be plenty of big games on in the first division. None other than Galway now against Cobh, Noel. It's a top of the table clash, even early doors. Obviously, Galway have 4 wins from 4 and a demolishing of Kerry last week, but a really good start. They go to St. Coleman's Park, and obviously Cobh 3 wins and a draw in their opening games. It brings back to the days, maybe, Noel, doesn't it, of when St. Coleman's Park was the death knell to many Limerick FC promotion push. I suppose you know a bit about that yourself. I know some of the heartbreak coming out of St. Coleman's Park, and they'll be looking to try and get that fortress going again this season.
Yeah, and the real problem with that was I would have coached most of those players at Cork City before they destroyed Limerick's promotion hopes. But anyway, look, I think it'll be a right good game. It certainly will be like an old St. Coleman's Park, I'd say, with a real raucous crowd under. And look, John Caulfield will be delighted with that as well. And Ali Horgan, you have to say that Galway seem to be really on a big run. They seem to be able to get the goals.
The year?
Look, it's very early to say, but if you ask me who do I think is going to win on Friday night, I think Galway are going to win on Friday night. Albeit with Cobh's good start. Obviously, they're better than they were last year, but are they better than Galway United? I'm not so sure, and I would think that Galway will probably do enough to get a win there and keep their impressive start going.
Yeah, and two sides, Noel, with very similar starts also play each other, with Waterford taking on Bray at the RSC as well. I suppose, look, Waterford will be happy with the response to losing to Galway as well. Bray Wanderers have been tipping along in the league. I suppose it's a hard one to call, but just going by home advantage, I would go for a Waterford win in this one.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go for a draw, and I think Waterford still aren't firing
Sitting on
all
the fence an
cylinders.
awful lot tonight.
Yeah, well, I'm only trying to get the result right. That's all, rather than sitting on the fence. But look, I think Bray are going to be good this year. I don't think they're going to be as good as Waterford and Galway. And I think if it was at the latter end of last season, I'd certainly be fancying Waterford, but I don't think that they've come close to hitting those kind of heights. And I think Bray, are not conceding a lot of goals either. And I think there's a little bit of goal threat, so I could certainly see that as a draw.
Yeah, and I suppose if you're looking at it from Billy Dennehy's point of view, Noel, with Kerry coming off the back of losing 9-1 to Galway in the league, the last place you want to be going to is away at all, but the last place you want to be going to is a Wexford side that picked up 4 points from 6, another lengthy trip. That's certainly not something. This will be a real test for Kerry as well, but there's going to be a lot of them. And in fairness, even after last week, I suppose it was encouraging to see the reaction from the Kerry public. There wasn't a lot of unbelievable criticism like you might see in Limerick in the past. And there was a lot of support for the Kerry players, considering the result as well.
Yeah, look, it was a real bad night at the office. I just think, and I do think that Wexford will be good enough to win regardless. But they'll certainly be working on their defence all the week, Kerry, I'd say, and they may well be prove to be difficult to break down. It's probably the worst thing you can do is probably meet a team that that has conceded 9 goals the following week, because there's only one thing going to be on their minds, and that to be as solid as they can. But I think there's enough good players in Wexford that they'll probably get a goal or two. I doubt it'll be anything like what happened last Friday night.
Yeah, probably not, and hopefully not, I suppose, as well for our Munster neighbours. On a last note, Longford Town host Finn Harps. No, whatever about the rest of the games, this would be incredible. I went for a draw on this one myself, to be honest. Probably because these two teams have been drawing a lot of their games anyway, early doors. It's very early with both of these literally being new squads, Noel. I mean, Stephen Henderson, Dave Rogers probably had the most upheaval in terms of the overturn in their squads over pre-season. So it's going to take another few weeks before you can read where these sides may be in the league, isn't it?
I think so, yeah, and I think you're right about the draw. Bournemouth is struggling to score goals in particular. I think the more impressive start has certainly been Longford's. I think from where they were, and losing Sam Verdon and that. I think, in fairness to Stephen, he's obviously put a bit of steel into them and maybe a bit of old style management. They had a great win below Waterford as well, and they're just tipping along nicely. He'll be delighted that they're not conceding goals, because all you need is one goal to get your 3 points. And if I was leaning one day, I probably would lean towards Longford, but I think it probably will end up in a draw.
Yeah, and I suppose on a final note to finish, Noel, we go to the Treaty United women's side. I suppose speaking of upheaval and overturns of the squad, there's been a lot of Canadian imports coming into the Treaty United squad under new manager Albin Heisa. Now they were unlucky, from what I believe, not to get a point out of the opening game where they lost 1-0 to Bohemians at the Markets Field. Coming up against a really good Shamrock Rovers squad was always going to be very hard last week, in a 4-0 defeat. Obviously yet to get off the mark, which I suppose has shades of last season, worryingly. The only thing about it is, Noel, you would expect this side, there seems to be a bit of a revitalisation in terms of the motivation in the squad. As I said, a lot of change, because last season was particularly hard. I suppose the only way is up, Noel, you'd imagine, for Treaty United women's squad this year. But, they will be desperate to get off the mark in terms of points as soon as they can.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's tough, and there's some really good sides out there. There's a lot of experienced players playing in that league, the likes of Wexford and Shelburne, Peamount and Shamrock Rovers, because of their ability to recruit the best are probably a little bit away. You know, they'll be looking at the games maybe against Galway and Cork. Obviously, I should have mentioned Athlone there as well. You know, who are obviously doing very well too. So it'll be the matches probably against the DLR Waves. You know, possibly Bows again. Galway and Cork are the ones that that they need to target. But look, I see there's a sprinkling of very young players in the team as well. A girl from West Limerick, if you like, I think she's only about 17. Katie Lawley, I think she played in the Gaynor Cup a few years ago. So big step up for her at her age, but that's probably the way to go. Provided that they can hold on to the players, which I'm sure they can. The advantage of the colleges here as well, UL, I'm sure will be a help to them in terms of players coming in there and maybe wanting to play at that level.